Welcome to Breaching the Boardroom. Today, we're diving into a topic that's as heartbreaking as it is dangerous: romance scams. To help us break it all down, we've got our very own David Mauro here and a special guest, Darren Mott, also known as the Cyber Guy. Darren is a retired FBI special agent with over 20 years of experience investigating cybercrime and counterintelligence threats. He now hosts the Cyber Guy podcast, where he shares insights on cybersecurity and how people and businesses can protect themselves from cyber threats. Darren, welcome to the show.
Ashley, thank you. I should also mention I also do a daily podcast, 3 times a week, called the Cyber Smart Morning News Update if you want your cyber news real quick in the morning. So there's that too.
Okay, cool. I'll be sure to link those down in the description here for this podcast too. Awesome. Well, let's hop into it. I'm going to kick things off by asking you all, what are romance scams?
Which one do you want to? Who do you want to go first? Who's going first?
I don't know. David, do you want to outline what a romance scam is and why we should care?
Well, yeah, because this one's kind of easier. So I'll take this one, and then we'll get into the details. I'll pass it over to the FBI guy. Yeah, so romance scams, the scammers use websites, social media platforms, online forums, dating apps, a whole bunch of different mediums, and they engage in, profiles with attractive photos, creating charming personas, right? And they gain the trust and affection of the victims, which are the targets. They operate as individual scammers, individual criminals, as well as organized crime call centers. And sometimes the employees working at those call centers don't even know that they're working for a crime organization. Darren, anything to add to that?
No, that's right. I mean, they utilize psychological means to get people to believe what it is that they're saying online because, this largely targets the elderly. It's not only the elderly, but largely targets those that are in the later stages of life, maybe widowers, divorced folks that, everybody has that a human connection and you're looking for that. And the online universe makes it easier to find people all over the place. And the scammers recognize that. And with every technology, the bad guys figure out how to utilize that for bad things. And exactly like Dave said, they use that to find the most vulnerable in our society and prey on their fears and their desires.
I will say that it is much more prevalent than most people think, because oftentimes the victims don't even tell their families about it because they're so embarrassed.
Right. And it actually, that's a great point, David. And so in the 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020 IC3 Internet Crime Complaint Center Cybercrime Report, romance scams against the elderly, which is primarily romance scams, is the big part of that, or at least a big part of it, is number 3 from a loss perspective. Cryptocurrency scams is number 1, business email compromise number 2, crimes against the elderly number 3. And I would argue that probably within that cryptocurrency piece, there's a large piece that also targets seniors, but they don't double count that. But again, we're here for romance scams specifically, but some of these romance scams can lead to the cryptocurrency scams because, hey, if you love me, you'll invest in my new app that will make us all a bunch of money. So what we can talk about that, we can get into details on that going forward.
Yeah.
So they are becoming more prevalent these days, I guess, in the elderly community. What are the most common tactics that they use to lure these victims?
Well, the one thing I do want to point out, it's not just the elderly. In general, I think that demographic is targeted more often with these types of scams. But in terms of the amount of scams, there's a lot of younger generations that use a lot of dating apps, and they are absolutely targeted. So with that, let's bounce back to your question.
Is that like catfishing on MTV?
Yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah, and it's actually quite effective because they're actually leveraging that not just to deplete the financial reserves of the victim, but to gain access to the victim's employer. So especially among younger
Okay.
And it's really as simple as just going to those main areas where people who are looking for relationships congregate. Right? Your dating apps, your social media platforms, all those things. And I would even add that with the addition of how much information is being lost through data breaches all over the place, that the ability to randomly find people just through email, it can be very effective as well, because there's so much information we have lost on our own personal privacy data that you can create dossiers of people and say, hey, we know that this person, he lost his wife a year ago. Here's his Facebook account. Here's his email account. We can reach out to him and create that conversation. LinkedIn is a huge one. I get these all the time from people like, hey, really like your profile. Can we talk more about whatever? It's exactly, I know what it's leading to, but the same thing, because if, you're going to have all that social media presence is now well known to the bad guys, and they're easy to find victims, because it's just shooting, spray and pray. You send out 10,000 emails, 10,000 messages. Someone's going to respond to you because they don't understand the threats targeting them.
Absolutely.
So, in addition to, I guess, feeling silly when you've discovered that you're in a romance scam, what kind of other effects do they have on you? Like financial strain, quite large?
Yeah, I mean, what they've been doing is, I mean, it's a con game. It's confidence, right? They will build up the confidence. They will love bomb people, and the old adage of if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Well, the same thing goes for romance. And when somebody is saying every single thing you've always wanted them to say, and how in the world how did you not find this person before? People are craving that, and it appeals on a very deep personal level. The damage that's done is psychological and financial. There's a lot of fallout from it. So there's a lot of internal beating up of somebody that, like, I'm so humiliated. I can't believe I fell for that. How dumb am I, etc. And they're not, right? They genuinely were socially engineered, right? They tapped into the part of the mind that drives behavior, right? It's the limbic part of the mind, the part that makes us buy things. It's the part that makes us do things, and it has no capacity for language. They tap into that because that's where all of our feelings are and our emotions, and they satisfy everything. And then typically, Darren, offer some color commentary, please. But generally, there's an incident that happens. I can't come visit, or I was planning on coming visit, but something happened. My card got canceled, or I wasn't able to make the plane. Could you wire transfer me the funds and I'll be there, right? It happens quite often. And
I'll give you the perfect example. I got a perfect story for this. Wrote about it in my book. That my wife has a friend whose mother is a widow, and she met a guy on Facebook, and within 3 to 5 days, he was telling her he loved her, right? He was a little younger than she was, had a couple pictures on his Facebook profile, would communicate through text, and maybe they spoke on the phone. That I can't guarantee they did, but I think they did. But, he said all the right things, and it hits that, like David said, it hits that limbic system in our brain. Like, this is great. He's hitting, it's fantastic. But the daughter said, Mom, does this not sound weird to you? She goes, no, he hasn't asked me for anything. He's just, he's lonely like I am. And so fortunately, she told my wife, and we invited the mother over to talk about this. And we spent an hour saying, look, here's the red flags I'm seeing, right? He had 160 friends on Facebook, but it was 160 people he was following. So they were all women. They weren't directly connected friends like you would get a friend request. He would just follow them, and it shows up on LinkedIn as these are the people you're following, and they're all women. Actually, and ironically, my wife, I said, just send one of them a message and say, hey, do you know this guy? So we picked a person out at random, and my wife sent her a message on Facebook and said, hey, I see that you're connected to this person. What do you know about him? And the response back was mind your own business, something like that. We didn't follow up on that, but that's just kind of a funny side note. He only had 4 pictures of him and maybe something with his kids. He claimed to be some kind of engineer working out west. And she said, well, he's never asked me for any money. So I don't know what you're talking about. He's, legit. I go, he's going to ask you for money. She goes, well, if he does, I don't have any to give him. I go, that's fine, but he's going to ask you. 3 days later, he's like, I really want to come visit you. We're over budget on this project. I need $60,000 to finish it. If you can send me that, I can finish the project and I'll come out and see you immediately. Fortunately, we had the conversation. She stopped communicating with him, and that was the end of it. So again, that's a good news story, but that's one of how many thousands that there is no good story in.
Well, and sometimes the grooming won't even happen quickly, right? It'll go over time and over time, and they will have a lot of video calls. They will get to know the person. They will spend a lot of time and really, really earn that trust. And, now it used to, one of the red flags is, well, they'll never get on a video call with you. right? And now with
Yeah, they can.
now with the development in the last 6 months to a year, and there's always been AI deepfake capability, but it's been subpar at best in the past. It's more for parlor games and, memes, right? But now it's gotten very, very good. Like, we have the ability to look and sound like other people, which is really cool and exciting, but also very, very scary. And scammers like this or cyber criminals like this, they leverage that to have those live conversations with them. And they will, get to know them. And they're like, oh, I see them every day. I know exactly what they look like. They look just like the picture, except that's not them, right? They're actually over in another country or they're somewhere else, and they're just deep faking the picture and possibly the voice at the same time.
And some of them aren't even deep faking, right? There's organized groups in Malaysia and Thailand or East Asia that they have one of their divisions are the women sitting around waiting to be the video calls.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. They actually, there's tons of organized call centers over there. And one of them will pay per text, like pay €1 to €2 per text. And they believe they are trying to drum up customer satisfaction, improve. Like, the workers there just feel they're getting paid to flirt because it's part of a mobile app company that they're working for, when in reality, it's to gain the money that they're going to steal from the victim. But they do all this lead up time and build all this trust.
And the other side part of that is a lot of those individuals are human trafficked. They're brought into these locations like, hey, here's a job opportunity. They get there, they take their passport, they take everything else, and then basically they're forced labor to do all this stuff. So a lot of the people that are reaching out and committing the romance scams are victims themselves. But that's perhaps a podcast for a different day.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic too, perhaps for another time. Can you tell us why do business owners need to be aware of romance scams, and how could, an employee at a company affect their business with a romance scam?
I mean, while romance scams might be viewed as a personal matter, an employee falling for a romance scam, it can have direct impact on an organization. So there's performance suffers, right, when they're involved in it. They essentially become an insider risk without even intending to. And the goal of the cyber criminal is to gain access to the employees, their targets, company credentials. There was an organization in Minnesota that lost $4 million due to a romance scam. They had, what had happened is they had convinced the person to make certain wire transfers, and given their role, they found out that they worked in the department where they can be involved in the wire transfers. And because of the trust that the person had and the need and the love that they had between them, right? Love is a very powerful mechanism to make you do things. People do crazy things for it, right? They move across the country. They, right? And this person had wire transferred several different wire transfers to organizations that they thought were good, but actually it was all of the funds were traced to the cyber criminal.
I would say beyond the funds, even there's a national security risk too here, right? If you're someone with a clearance and you're working for a cleared entity or someone within the government, they may not even want, money per se. There may be hey, I'm interested in this particular thing you might be working on. Could you answer this question for me? I've been thinking about this for a long time and it doesn't make sense. Can you answer what this means? And then maybe accidentally you're giving up some kind of protected secret that's valuable to national security. A lot of companies that work in the defense industrial base stuff, they all have unclassified material, but you take all that material and you combine it together at the end for whatever it is that's being built, and it's a top secret project, right? So the folks doing that are smart enough to know that, if I find the right person and they have the right amount of access, I can get the information I want. There's a story from years ago where there was a particular weapon system that had a particular coating on the inside of the barrel that made it very difficult for the barrel to have any problems when the stuff was flying through it, right? But if you didn't have that inside of that barrel coated, it would blow up, the barrel would break apart. And so they knew that the Chinese government had stolen a lot of that particular weapon system, but didn't have it all. And their barrels kept kept having that problem. Well, one of the ships that had that weapon system was in a port overseas, and one of the sailors that worked on that weapon system was sitting in a bar, and someone walked up to him and started having a conversation with them, and talked about what he worked on, because again, social engineering, right? You gain your trust and you're just having a conversation. He said, well, how does that barrel not explode with all that stuff going through there? And he goes, well, it's coated with this. So gave up that information. Again, that's not necessarily a romance scam, but the same kind of idea, right? As far as information.
Absolutely. And once you gain that trust, once a cyber criminal has that trust, then they can joke with the victim. They can be, hey, come up with a scenario where they need to log in to some innocuous site, Instagram or something, and the victim oftentimes might give just those credentials to that, right? But then by talking so often, they'll be like, well, you use your same password for everything, right? And they do, because we still do that a lot, right? And now the perpetrator knows the key system that they're trying to log in. They now have the password for that. And then there's also sextortion, which is really a whole podcast on itself, because once they build that trust and that relationship over time, it becomes intimate. They share intimate photos, or they just share any photos and then they superimpose it with AI. But they say, we're going to, they extort them. They say, we're going to release this to your family, to your friends, and they're vicious about it. Like, don't think for a second that they're kind or they have empathy here. Like, they will destroy somebody's life, and they will reach out to family members, to other people. If they're at a job, they'll reach out to their managers. They will go very vicious and send them all of these, embarrassing photos. Meanwhile, the person has to be like, that's not me. They doctored my face on that body or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, it looks exactly like you. Right. And plus, employers and managers and other family members, now that person is battling that. And especially when it happens in the younger generations, there have been tons of reports in the news about suicides that happen all the time from people not wanting to face that kind of disgrace.
What do you do if that happens to you? Like, say your face is put on some not super great photos to be having on the internet. What do you do at that point?
So I have two stories for that. So one happened to a 20-year-old and one happened to a 50-plus-year-old. So this is not an issue that is strictly for teenagers, but it's certainly that one gets a lot of the news because a lot of teenagers are committing suicide because of it, right? So let me use the older guy first. So the older guy reached out to a friend of mine who's a PI. He's a retired agent and had this issue. And my friend said, call Darren. He's a cyber person. He can help you through this. So the guy walked me through it, and exactly what you said. Like he was in a chat room or somewhere, and he met someone, and they started exchanging pictures. And then they said, okay, now I want $1,000. I'm going to send this to your wife, because they then, connected with him on Facebook. So then they knew what his wife's Facebook was, because obviously on his Facebook, you can find his wife's Facebook and his in-laws' Facebook and everybody else's Facebook. And they started the extorter started connecting with those people and saying, hey, I'm not going to send them anything now, but if you don't send me $1,000, I'm going to send you all your pictures. He's like, what do I do? And I go, well, keep this in mind. They're not going, worst case scenario, they will send the pictures to your relatives. All right. The best thing you can do is just come out and admit you did something stupid. I can't help you with what the fallout is with your wife. That's something between you and her. But I said, is your face in any of the pictures? He said, no. I said, well, just say they're not you. Same thing with the 20-year-old. The parents called me and said, hey, this is what happened. $500. They're going to send it to all his friends. I said, well, chances are pretty good that's a bluff. They probably don't have all of his friends' information. This was not this was a texting thing, right? A random text or something like that. So I said, and even if they do, if his face is not shown, you can say it's not me. Now, like Dave said, you could actually add a face to that, but you gotta say, they look at AI. And that's the excuse you can use. It's just AI. They used AI to make it look like me. It's not me. And they ignored the posting for the 20-year-old, ignored the posting. Nothing ever happened. Never sent the videos out, never followed back up. So a lot of times those threats are not going to be followed through on. So, but again, that's a risk you take, right? They may do it. If they have enough information to send it out, they may do it. But chances are they'll just move on to the next person who might actually give them the money, because it's more of an expense to them to spend the time to send it to the people on the contact list when they could be making money out somewhere else. So, those, again, it's a personal risk assessment you got to think about from that perspective. But in most cases, what I've seen, ignore them, say it's not you, and move on, and that's the end of it. And that for those two cases, that was the end of it, right? Sure, some embarrassment, right? And from a parental standpoint, and this is very important, and I actually gave the example of the kid in my book, but the important thing for parents is to have the conversations with your kids to say, look, if you do anything stupid online, don't be afraid to come and tell me this is happening.
Right.
And fortunately for them, they had that conversation. He went to them, hey, this is happening to me. They said, okay, let's call Darren. We'll go from there. So because again, shame is the big thing. And there's also a self-fulfilling prophecy here in the sense that, like with romance scams, if you've already sent $2,000 over, there's a good chance you're going to send more because you want to prove to yourself that you have not been stupid and fallen for a scam. You want to prove that you think this is real. And that's kind of the part of the psychology that the bad guys realize. Once I get them to pay once, they'll keep paying because they believe it's real. They have to believe in their head it's real, because if they don't, then they're going to look stupid. That's the concern. That's their concern. I want to tell their family member, hey, I sent this money. Yeah, I shouldn't have.
Exactly.
That makes sense. What can you do to prevent this from happening? Like if my grandmother had a smartphone, like what should I tell her to be on the lookout for?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things. But the first thing I would say is, anybody that you want to meet or have a relationship with, get the family involved and get other opinions. And I know sometimes that's a hard ask, but I would say have that conversation and say, look, be prepared for a request for money. And as soon as that happens, please contact us. The other thing, a lot of elderly will be scrolling through because they grew up in a generation that didn't have technology. They grew up in a generation where advertisers or people wouldn't lie blatantly. Like it's part of the issue that we have with misinformation out there, because somebody creates a meme on Canva, right, and posts it, and everybody's like, oh, can you believe that happened? I'm like, before you forward anything you see on social media, please verify it. Google it. Like, look it up, see if it actually happened, because you'd be surprised at how many things are trending, right? That never happened, right? And very similar to products that seem like they're on a great and outstanding price. And it's the same thing for people pretending to be something that they're not.
I'm going to jump on a soapbox here, Dave, following up on exactly what you just said. If you go on Facebook and you post that if you didn't hear the news, effective January 1st, I don't give Meta permission to use my pictures, it is not real. Stop posting that. It is so irritating. That's not real. Stop posting. Anyway, but chapter 3 of my book is called The Art of Skepticism. So in answer to your question, Ashley, what do you tell your grandmother? Be skeptical of everything that you are not expecting. Yeah. Okay. Someone reaches out to you on Facebook that is not someone you know from high school or whatever. Be skeptical of that connection. You get an email, random email, be skeptical of that email. Do not click links. Do not go to websites that are listed in any of those things. And the reason bad guys win, I've said this for 15 years, is because someone always clicks a link. And that's why they win. Because it's not anything really more beyond that. Someone clicks a link, bad things happen. Skepticism is your friend in this case.
Yep. If you've been looking for a new camera and they're always $500 and all of a sudden you see that camera advertised for $89, it's not real. But what is real is the malware that's on the back of that ad, because it's just an image with a link on the back, and they're going to pay Meta to advertise for it. No one's going to check it, and it's going to go out to thousands of different people.
And I'll add this, don't go to the first link when you search for something. Scroll down, pick like the 7th or 8th link and go from there. And if you like, and this is not romance scams kind of run congruent with tech support scams. So when you have a tech support issue, go to the site of the thing you're trying to fix. Don't go to Google and say Apple support, because the first Apple support button is a bogus scam button. So,
right.
So keep it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's been in the news, and I want to ask you all about it. I've heard of people falling in love with AI chatbots. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Darren, What you're
Be skeptical. Be skeptical.
Just be
That's a good question, right?
skeptical.
Yeah, because I mean, it's so easy now to create basically a script to say, all right, I'm going to, I want to communicate with someone. And now, not only that, like Chat GPT and some of those will kind of see that scam and stop it to a little bit. You can always jailbreak it. But now DeepSeek exists. Those particular protections aren't going to exist. So if you're a bad guy and you want to create a big, long script that continues to communicate with the person through AI, they will do it. I mean, and you can almost see it now because it's designed. It doesn't read your response very well, and actually, any response will get the chatbot to just send the next thing in line. So, but again, if you don't have that skeptical approach to everything, you're eventually going to buy it because AI is good enough to confuse or convince the, I don't say weak-minded, but the people that want to believe, right? That want to believe that this is love here and it's telling me everything I want to hear, so I'm good to go. But how do you root it out? That's a good question, and that's not, I'll be honest, not something I've really delved that deeply into. I probably should, just for exactly that question.
It's a big challenge. I mean, when you think about it, there are legitimate companies that are out there that are marketing AI avatars, right?
Mm-hmm.
To companies because it's almost like it's better than a pre-recorded, let's say you work at a larger company and you have to repeat this process or handle this ticket or this issue, hundreds and hundreds of times, and you wind up saying the same thing. You could try and pre-record some of this stuff, or you could just train an AI avatar to live think like you, speak like you, look like you, and address those things, right? And then you get the summary of the meeting notes and you can correct anything later. So while it may have its place in the future of organizations, it is definitely something that is being exploited more. It's definitely being exploited more often that we're seeing than it is in mainstream use right now.
It's just going to get better.
Yeah, it's going to get better. I mean, in the last 6 months, it's gotten so good. It is virtually undetectable by the human eye. We could be deep fakes right now. I'm not really here. I'm over at a beach.
Actually, my LinkedIn picture is a deep fake.
Yes.
Is it really?
Yeah. Headshotpro.ai. I sent them 13 pictures. They made much better pictures than I could do. Face is still real, but the rest of it's not.
The picture that I have for Cybercrime Junkies, the guy there who's my assistant, right? It's all AI. And he looks very, very human. People will message him and talk to him.
Nice.
He's not real.
Yeah, I was thinking about that yesterday, and I was like, having a conversation with ChatGPT about something like, oh, that sounds bad. Can you make that tone a little different? And just kind of like you can talk to it like a friend. So I feel like people might fall prey to.
Absolutely. You can ask it to humanize it more.
Yeah.
Have more compassion. Have it have a more personal tone or a more romantic tone, and it'll rewrite it that way.
I had to send an email this morning that I didn't want to send, and so I had to write in something. Can you make this have a friendlier tone?
Yeah, I got that email. I want to talk to you about that. No, I'm just kidding.
Do you know about AI companions? It's a thing. It's like a paid service.
Well, that makes sense.
No matter what you're looking for, this company's human-like memory and creativity fosters a deep, consistent, and evolving relationship. So it's actually like a chatbot.
So you essentially train your own chatbot, right?
I guess so.
Yeah.
So it's ransomware. It's romance on demand.
Yes.
Romance on demand.
Wow.
Well,
it makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you profit? Why wouldn't you profit off it? Again, in this case, I'm sure the privacy agreement has all sorts of caveats about this is not a real person and we can't get,
Right. But nobody reads those use
Nobody reads that, right?
That's why TikTok was so popular.
I will say I read all of DeepSeek's privacy stuff. I read them all.
Yes.
And so I'm pretty sure what they did is say, take ChatGPT's privacy thing and kind of make it different so we could put it in. But anyway,
make it
that's
different,
a different
but the
podcast,
same.
right? Yeah.
Interesting. Well, this has been a really insightful discussion on romance scams. It's a super interesting topic. I know it's so common, and although I don't know anybody that's experienced it, maybe they might just not be saying anything because it's can be kind of embarrassing. But it affects people of all ages, and it could be anybody.
Well, and it affects businesses too, because there is a very real risk there, because people will do crazy things, and it becomes that person, that employee becomes an insider risk. And so it's part of a insider risk program. It's part of an organization addressing security awareness. Even smaller organizations are coming up with policies or part of their ERP plan where they can, if you have issues, you can go talk to somebody and we'll help you report it, things like that. But it's like anything else. If it's not reported, there's no help that can be provided.
Mm-hmm. And you touch on this in your cybersecurity awareness training that you do. David does a public service initiative. We do this here at NetGain it's a no-cost training for teams on cybersecurity awareness. And I know I've compiled some resources for you. I know that you've talked about romance scams and sextortion in there too.
Yeah, it's because it's really devastating, and it bleeds into people's jobs. It's just like anything else. I mean, when you look at some of the people that you watch the news and you'll see, I don't know if anybody watches the news anymore, but if they watch, because some people get their news from social media, but if you're watching the news, you'll hear like this sweet little old lady who was the comptroller for this organization embezzled all this money, and you're like, what happened, right? But you find a trigger usually that occurred, right? They were involved in a romance scam. They had this event happened, and they had to get money for it. And when they set their priorities, right, the big bad company loses compared to the love of their life. And so it's something that just education and having a culture that rewards people coming forward and doesn't penalize them in any way, right? They should be able to come to somebody if they see something. They need to be able to say something. Same thing for like phishing emails, right? If you see something and it looks weird, like you should be able to alert, right? So that somebody that knows how to determine whether it actually is phishing can let you know.
Yeah, I always get excited when I see like a phishing. Well, normally I don't know that they're phishing tests, but when I pass one, I get very excited that I've shared it with the company. I did fail one on Friday.
It's always humiliating when I fail.
Humiliated.
Yes, it's always humiliating when I fail them too, because I'm like,
if this makes you feel any better, I was talking to a company. They do red penetration testing, and so they had to get into this facility, 400 people, and they had to do both physically and cyber wise. And so you probably heard. I think you've heard the story, Dave. If not, you'll laugh anyway. So they figured out, and they put together an email with an Excel spreadsheet that had a vulnerability that if it was run, they knew it would work on any system within this particular organization. So they sent it to 26 people and said, out of 400, and said, if your name is on the attached spreadsheet, you have not taken InfoSec training for the year, and your access will be cut off on Friday. Okay. So how many of those 26 people do you think opened up that Excel spreadsheet?
22.
Take a guess. 22, Dave?
15.
31. They passed it to other people who also opened it.
My God.
My gosh.
Unbelievable.
Remember, but, someone always clicks the link.
Yeah. Well, and there's a way of training in security. Like there's some security awareness approaches have come under fire because like a law firm that was at the quarter end and talking about bonuses, they literally fished their partners by sending out like, here's your quarterly bonus. Like that's the only thing they cared about at that moment. They're like, here's your quarterly bonus. Oh, you clicked on it. That's terrible. But it was exactly what legitimate one would have been.
Right. Yeah.
And so
it's
people
ruthless.
were furious over it because they're like, look, you want to teach us about security, that's one thing, but don't play with our emotions like that.
Well, it is, but I mean, I guess it depends on how the email was crafted, but I kind of see
there
their
were
side
probably
of it, right?
I think it's a good actual test because
Sure.
When somebody is doing OSINT, open source intelligence, right? Like actually, looking at the target, there's a lot to find. You create dossiers on everybody. Mm-hmm. You know what to say, who to say it to, and the timing of it. That's what a good phishing email is going to say. Good spear phishing email. And so it would come across like, quarterly bonus coming, right?
Right.
And
if I was one of the victimized lawyers, from a vindictive standpoint, every email I got from anybody in the company, I would immediately contact them back and said, "Did this come from you? Did this come from you?
Did this come from me?" Just the flurry of emails.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of phishing emails, I know we're doing this episode. It's Valentine's Day here pretty soon. I wonder, are we going to be getting a lot of like phishing emails and texts and things that have to do with Valentine's Day coming up?
Absolutely.
With the holidays, it just killed my phone. I mean, many of them.
Never let a good event or catastrophe go unexploited is the phrase, right? Like
Super Bowl too.
Right. Super Bowl,
Okay.
plane crash,
Wildfires.
Valentine's Day, wildfires. Like there's a lot of donations you can make to my cause, right? And it's called the whatever wildfire organization.org. It looks legit, right? Just look at it. Just verify before you pay, right? Verify before you give up sensitive information.
Be skeptical.
Yes, be skeptical.
Trust no one.
I call it vigilant.
Yes, there you go.
Vigilant.
Be vigilant.
Right? Which means don't trust, verify first.
So yeah, whether you're navigating online relationships or running a business, I guess the biggest takeaway is stay vigilant. This has been an awesome conversation. Darren, David, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us, Darren, just real quick, can you tell us about your book and the title of your book if our listeners want to check that out? I'll also link your podcasts.
Sure, thanks. It's called It's called Get Cyber Smart, a user-friendly guide to protecting your family, your business, and yourself online. I also just started a new business called Gold Shield Cybersecurity, which caters largely to law firms to protect them, but just got that one off the ground, so still trying to figure out how all that works.
Well, good luck.
And the book's very good. He was kind enough to send me a signed copy, and I've got it here. So I need to have it displayed. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.